Welcome. I was talking to my dad yesterday, and he said, Sarah, they watch my show every day. My parents are like my biggest fans. I love them so much. And he's like, Sarah, I have a real problem with your new show because every time you say welcome to Sara Gonzales Unfiltered, you say it like unfiltered is a downer. And I was like, what? He said, the way you say it is just, it's like a downer. It's like negative, and you just need to say it differently. And so I was sitting here and I was like, I don't know how to welcome to Sara Gonzales Unfiltered. Like that, I guess. I don't know. But I don't feel like a downer when I say it. Welcome to Sara Gonzales Unfiltered. Maybe that's better. I am chugging Celsius in my mug today, which you can find at shop.blazemedia.com, by the way. I am chugging Celsius today because yesterday was Super Tuesday, and I was up super late. So I want to go into some of the results from Super Tuesday. Trump and Biden obviously dominating their respective primaries throughout the night, moving the two that much closer to the inevitable matchup in the general election in November. So Donald Trump, he won 13 of the 14 states last night. He lost Vermont only to Nikki Haley, of course. He led with an average of 73.78%. He has a total of 995 delegates already. Of course, he needs 1,215 to secure the nomination. And I want to play some of Donald Trump's victory speech from last night. Watch.
We're going to close our borders. We're going to have to deport a lot of people, a lot of bad people, because our countries can't live like this. Our cities are choking to death. Our states are dying. And frankly, our country is dying. And we're going to make America great again, greater than ever before. Thank you very much. It's been a big night. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So just to go through some of the states here. Alabama, he led by 70 points. Alaska, he led by 75 points. Arkansas, 58 points. California, 60 points. Guys, I was actually shocked at that. In California, in the Republican primary, Trump led by 60 points. That should tell you something about the Republicans over in California. Colorado, 30 points. Maine, 46. Massachusetts, Donald Trump led by 23 points. By the way, on the Democrat side in Massachusetts, nearly 10% of Democrat voters selected no preference for their nominee rather than Joe Biden. I think 10% is a lot to just say, I don't actually have a preference. I showed up to the polls to vote, and I'm not even going to check the mark, to check the box for Joe Biden. I'd rather just check no preference. That says something. Minnesota, Trump led by 40 points. And over in the Democrat side, Joe Biden did win, but 20% of voters selected uncommitted. Now, these were a lot of protest votes against Joe Biden's support of Israel. But still, 20%. I mean, I don't know that they vote for Donald Trump in the primary or in the general, certainly, but maybe they don't show up to vote. So who knows? But North Carolina, Trump led by 50 points. Oklahoma, 66 points. Tennessee, 57 points. Texas, 60 points. Utah, 17. What's going on in Utah? Vermont, of course, Haley won by only 4 points. Virginia, Trump up 29 points. So a solid victory for Trump. So solid, in fact, that... Sorry, might get a little choked up here. I regret to inform you, Nikki Haley has finally announced she is suspending her campaign. Here's some of her
In all
concessions.
likelihood, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee when our party convention meets in July. I congratulate him and wish him well. I wish anyone well who would be America's president. Okay. Our country is too precious to let our differences divide us. I have always been a conservative Republican and always supported the Republican nominee.
Okay.
But on this question, as she did on so many others, Margaret Thatcher provided some good advice.
Here we go.
When she said, quote, "Never just follow the crowd. Always make up your own mind." It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. and I hope he does that. At its best, politics is about bringing people into your cause, not turning them away. And our conservative cause badly needs more people. This is now his time for choosing.
All right. Well, noticeably absent there was an endorsement of Donald Trump, which, of course, everyone else has done in the race, including Ron DeSantis. But for some reason, I don't know, the catty Nikki Haley refuses to actually take the step of endorsing Donald Trump, even though I will say she did sign that RNC pledge saying that she would support the Republican candidate. But you can't trust Tricky Nikki, apparently, with her promises. She often breaks them. So in these primaries, I want to get into a little bit of state-specific notes here. This is awesome. Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson over in North Carolina won the Republican primary last night for governor. And I want to play some of this. Let's just say his victory speech was like epically based. Watch.
Here's something else I'm not supposed to say. Ain't but two genders.
Preach. Here we go. About to go to church now. About to go to church. Tell him.
Ain't nothing but men and women. And I can already see WRL out there. They licking their pencils right now, trying to write fierce as they can. Get every word of this here. Get every word of this. You can go to the doctor and get cut up. You can go down to the dress shop and get made up.
I love this.
You can go down there and get drugged up. But at the end of the day, you were just a drugged up, dressed up, made up, cut up man or woman. You ain't changed what God put in you, that DNA.
Raucous
you
applause.
Can't transcend God's creation. I don't care how hard you try. The transgender movement in this country, if there's a movement in this country that is demonic and that is full of the spirit of Antichrist, it is the transgender movement. It's time for grown-ups and time for Christians to start standing up and being unafraid to tell the truth. Come after me if you want to. I don't care. You want my head? Here it is right here.
Guys, this guy just
Come
won.
on, come get it. I don't care because it's time for us to stand up. Now, I'm not afraid to stand up and tell the truth about that issue. They're dragging our kids down into the pit of hell, trying to teach them that mess in our schools. Tell you like this, that ain't got no place at no school. 2 + 2 don't equal transgender. It equals 4. You need to get back to teaching them how to read instead of teaching them how to go to hell.
Y'all.
Yeah, I said it and I mean it.
This is, he won with this type of platform and rhetoric. This is resonating with voters. So again, I know that we thought that we were going to see a red wave in 2022 in the midterms that did not exist. But the fact that you can get elected by saying these truths, that was overwhelming support there that you heard with him saying these things that were frowned upon as like, oh, it's controversial to say. And he's like, I'm going to tell you and I'm going to get elected and I'm going to be the governor. So also in Texas, there was a bloodbath in the Texas House. Speaking of voters waking up, Speaker of the House Dade Phelan is going to go to a runoff, and he may not even keep his seat. If he does keep his seat, he's going to lose his speaker position. They're not going to vote him as speaker if he can't even get elected without going into a runoff. But of course, we are hoping that he doesn't even keep his seat. So drunk Dade is out as Speaker of the Texas House. 9 incumbents lost. Another 8 will go to runoffs. And Trump and Paxton endorsed candidates fared very well last night, along with the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals judges that we so desperately needed as Ken Paxton fights the voter fraud here in the state of Texas. So a lot of good news abounds in some of these states. And speaking of good news in these states, I would like to also point out that Joe Biden did lose the Democrat primary of American Samoa. Yes, that is a U.S. territory. And this is the first time an incumbent president has lost a primary since Jimmy Carter in 1980. And I believe it was like to none of the above or something. It was just to no one. And he still lost it. So that tells you how it's going for Joe Biden. Now, I want to play a couple different clips here of the MSNBC coverage talking about, you talk about what is the number one issue for voters. Well, across the board, across the nation, it is clearly immigration because the border crisis affects us all. But not so if you're Jen Psaki and Joy Reid and Rachel Maddow on MSNBC up in your ivory towers laughing at people who are talking about immigration all the way over in Virginia. Watch.
I mean, if you look at some of these exit polls, I mean, I live in Virginia. Immigration was the number one issue. Yes. I mean, again, these could change in Virginia.
Well, Virginia does have a border with West Virginia. Very, very contested area.
What? Oh, isn't it so funny that Virginians would care about the border? Like, these people do not live in real life. And I feel like we need constant reminders that, like, they hate you. They hate us. They hate what we stand for. They can't even relate to the fact that we are having to, all of us, I'm not talking about here in Texas, all of us are having to deal with the disastrous open borders policy of Joe Biden. And even still, Joy Reid, with no facts, no shred of evidence, is like, well, actually, Republicans they're just voting based on all of their racism when they're going out to the polls. Watch.
But Republican voters don't vote that way. They don't vote based on economics or based on the benefits they're getting economically from the president. They're increasingly, from the Tea Party on, they're voting on race.
Are we?
They're voting on this idea of an invasion of brown people over the border. The idea that they can't get whatever job they want. A black person got it. Therefore, drive all the blacks out of the colleges, get rid of DEI. That is what they're voting on. They're just voting specifically on racial animus at this stage. It isn't about economics.
No.
Little news flash to Joy Reid. First of all, your hair sucks and it's ugly and you should change it. Second of all, here's the thing. It has nothing to do with the color of their skin and it has everything to do with their unvetted strangers, because I'm going to tell you, it's not a good look. She did go a little bit more brassy. It still sucks. It's ugly and it's cultural appropriation. And honestly, white Europeans are very offended that you are culturally appropriating them with your blonde hair. Okay, Joy. But, you know, like, you know what? This is a time where I am very inclusive with everyone who's coming across the border. I don't care what nationality you are. All of the Chinese people who are coming across, all of the Russians, all of the Iranians, all of the people who are coming in through the border unvetted. I'm very inclusive in the fact that I don't want them here. I don't want unvetted strangers in our country. It has nothing to do with the color of their skin, which literally anyone would know if they were not sitting up in their ivory towers over at MSNBC, not associating with any of the serfs, any of the plebeians down there. Oh, what are they? Oh, they just don't like brown people. No, it's just that, like, we don't like, I don't know, things that happen to Laken Riley and many other Americans. Like, I don't know. That's just, we don't like crime. We don't like sex trafficking. We don't like we don't like fentanyl. We don't like any of the other things pouring across the border. Maybe you should try, I don't know, relating to the average person every once in a while. All right. I got to take a quick break. And then when we come back, we've got a bunch of awesome guests. But when we come back, I want to welcome Dr. Peter McCullough to go over, you know what, some data on vaccines you are not going to believe when we come back. I want to welcome my friend. It's been a while. Dr. Peter McCullough here, of course, world-renowned cardiologist, doctor, physician, author of his book, The Courage to Face COVID-19, which I highly recommend to all. But I wanted to bring you on, doctor, to talk about these new CDC-recommended RSV vaccines that JASE Medical. So JASE Medical is there for, during COVID. We were just talking about COVID. During COVID, there were a lot of shortages. There are a lot of medications that are made in China. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way, but it is. And when China shuts down, they shut down and you can't get your medications. And so JASE Medical is there for, drug shortages, things of that nature. If you're on the go and you need emergency medication. So they have a JASE case that contains 5 essential antibiotics, which treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. And it's customizable. You can get a bunch of add-on medications. You can choose the ones that best fit you and your family's needs. They even have ivermectin as an add-on option. So all I'm saying is there's been a shortage of amoxicillin before too, right? And it's like you don't want to mess with strep throat not treating it. So what you need to do is make sure you go get a JASE case, not just for you, but if you've got like grown adult, children with families of their own, you can get them a gift card so they can get one as well. So everyone can be prepared for the unexpected. You can go to jasemedical.com, enter code Sarah at checkout for a discount. That is jasemedical.com. I want to welcome to the program now Peter Schweizer. He is, of course, an author and one of my favorite people when it comes to really digging in and exposing the corruption within, everything, but particularly to the American government, of course, the Biden family, the Biden crime family, I should say. So I love all of the work that you're doing, but I want to in particular talk to you about your new book. It's called Blood Money. And you and your team spent more than 2 years scouring restricted Chinese military documents. They data mined American financial records, tracked U.S. political leaders and family business. And you're dropping a bunch of bombshells in this book, exposing the CCP's covert operation that's, American drug trade, social justice movement, medical industry, just to sow chaos within the U.S.
Yeah.
That sounds really scary.
Yeah. I mean, the image that I think of when I think of this book is America's on fire. There are all these things going on. China's holding an empty can of gasoline, and our leaders are basically not saying or doing anything about it. It's not that they caused these problems, but they've exacerbated them and made them worse. That's violence in the streets with what they're doing and equipping some criminal gangs in the United States, what they're certainly doing in supporting and encouraging some of these extreme violent left-wing groups that are operating in America's streets. And of course, fentanyl poisoning. A lot of people think of that as something that the drug cartels are doing. The drug cartels are really the junior partners. It is really the Chinese that are the senior partners in that operation.
So they have like a direct link to each other.
Absolutely. So if you think about every link in this chain, the precursors, of course, we all know come from China. Those are the component parts of the fentanyl. They get shipped from China. They go to a port in Mexico called Manzanillo. 90% of the precursors go there. That port, that terminal is run by a Chinese company. They take those precursors, they send them up to a town in northern Mexico. It's got to be put together and made into fentanyl. There are 2,000 Chinese nationals in northern Mexico that are doing that. They live there and that's what they do. When they want to create the pills to put the fentanyl in, they use pill presses that the Chinese have provided them. Then the cartels, when they communicate with each other, they need secure communication. They're using Chinese apps and they're using Chinese devices because they know that the Chinese will not share those communications with the United States. And then finally, the laundering of all the drug money. In the cocaine days, the Mexican cartels used to do that in Latin American banks. Now they do it in Chinese state-owned banks.
Wow. So this is... it was a thing that I always, when the fentanyl really started getting bad, I was like, I don't understand why Mexico would be, I get it that for them, it's about the money. For Mexico, it's about the money. But I'm like, but if you're killing all of your customers, why would you, that's not a solid business model.
No, and that's a genius point that you're making, because on the face of it, doesn't make sense because the cartels are doing that. Here's basically the trade-off. The cartels are helping kill their customers, but the profit margin for fentanyl is 8 to 10 times what it is for cocaine. So they're willing to suffer those casualties. Meanwhile, the senior partner, the Chinese, making money is great, but what they really want to do is kill Americans.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing with fentanyl, it's not like heroin, it's not like cocaine. Most people that are dying from this poisoning don't even know they're taking fentanyl. They think they're taking a Vicodin, or it's some college kid who's, says, can I borrow an Adderall from a roommate to study for an exam? They take it and suddenly they're dead. It's now the leading cause of death for Americans under the age of 45.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And China's like, good. We want to kill Americans. This is how we're going to do it. So I want to. So you talk about the social justice movement as well, and China's involvement in that here in this country.
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So it's on a couple of levels. First, if you look at a lot of the violent protests we had in 2020 with BLM and those issues, and the ones we're having now with sort of the pro-Hamas protests that we're seeing on the streets, there's two groups that are leading them. One's called PSL, the other one's FRSO. These are hard left groups that are aligned with China. They've sworn allegiance to China, to the CCP. In some cases, they have met with Chinese CCP officials. There are flows of funds. And so this is part of their effort to push extremes. A lot of people went out in 2020 to say, hey, we're concerned about how the police are interacting in the black community. Well, these groups went out and said, no, all cops are racist. We need to shut down all the police. And they have these violent protests. So they're doing it on that level. But then you look at a movement like the trans movement, which has grown up in the last 4 or 5 years, kind of emerged out of nowhere. Turns out that two of the biggest funders of that movement are actually Chinese billionaires. One of them is a guy named Roy Singham. He's an American who made his fortune selling his company to an investment firm partly owned by the Chinese government. He moved to China. He lives now in China. He's friends with CCP members. He, is invited to their events. He has these close ties. He's put $161 million into radical causes, a lot of that into the trans movement. The other one is a guy named Joe Tsai, who is one of the co-founders of Alibaba, which is the kind of Amazon of China. He's poured tens of millions of dollars into the trans cause. And here's the crazy part, Sarah. If they were true believers in that this was just something they were passionate about, you would expect them to be doing the same thing in China.
Exactly right.
But they're not. They're
exactly
not. They're
right.
only doing it in the United States, even though I think anybody in that community would say the situation is far worse in China than it is in the United States. But they're not pushing the cause there.
Which, I mean, same goes for like TikTok.
Yes.
Right. I mean, they don't allow all of this madness to go on in their own country. I mean, you're looking at China and they're like, I'm not advocating for like their policies with their youth, because obviously they go too far. But I mean, they're turning their young boys into machines, getting them ready for war. And we're just like, and celebrating our inclusion or something. So I mean, it's really scary when you look at what they're doing and how they're building up for success, and we just seem to be completely asleep at the wheel. Yeah. It's scary.
Yeah, no, they call it cognitive warfare, and they think that if you look at the future trajectory, things look better for China than for the United States. You've got TikTok, which is controlled by ByteDance, this Chinese company close to the CCP. I quote in the book extensively from Chinese propaganda experts who talk about how TikTok is the Trojan horse, that they have access to our kids. And what are they feeding our kids? Basically cotton candy, somebody in blue hair screaming on a street corner. That's basically what you're getting on TikTok, and our kids are getting that. ByteDance has an equivalent in China called Douyin, but you don't have blue hair screaming on the street. They're looking at science experiments, lessons in Chinese history, of course, distorted to the CCP version. It's a much more serious educational app. So they're giving us, our kids, cotton candy. They're giving their kids spinach, and they're very confident they're going to win the cognitive warfare going forward.
I mean, I'm a little bit nervous that they are going to win going forward. Yeah. And not to mention, Peter, you've done so much work on this particular subject as well. It's like, well, don't worry. It's not like we have a compromised president, right?
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
Biden will handle it. He's not compromised by the CCP.
Yeah, he's compromised by the CCP. He's also, so quiet on the issue of fentanyl. He never, ever, ever wants to confront the Chinese of their involvement. When he meets with the Chinese officials, he says, well, I raise it, but no finger pointing.
Right.
Well, what I point out in the book is, the Chinese gang leader, there's a gang called UBG, headed by a gang leader named Zhang Anlo, who also goes by the name White Wolf, right? If you're a gang leader, you have to have a name. White Wolf, that's the gang that set up the Sinaloa cartel and made them the kings of fentanyl in Mexico. Oh. He has a business partner who in 2017 gave the Bidens $5 million.
Oh my gosh.
So you literally have 1 degree of separation from the first family, the Biden family, to the fentanyl trade in Mexico. So does he really want to have a conversation about this? No, he does not.
Of course not.
And that's one of the reasons that I think that he is silent on that issue and silent on a lot of other things as well.
Wow, that is fascinating. Tell everyone where, I know we got to take a quick break here and I want to respect your time. Tell everyone where they can find this book.
You can find it everywhere. We were #1 last week on Amazon the whole week. And you can find it in any bookstore. They've got it at Costco and Target and everywhere. So
I love that. Blood Money by Peter Schweizer. Peter, thank you not just thank you for being here, but thank you so much for all of the work that you do. You've done such tremendous work digging and uncovering so much that we don't have many journalists and investigators quite like you anymore. So I appreciate all of your work.
Thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. We'll be right back. I want to welcome Jason Buttrill to the show.
Best for last.
Yes. And we were going to be matching and we were both going to be sleeveless, but then he put a jacket on because he was cold. Sun's out, guns out, baby.
It's kind of cold out here. Man, I don't know how you deal with it.
No, I know. I was like, well, it's funny because I was on the way here. And of course, my husband, who is the director here, he texted me, it's cold in studio. And I was like, well, I'm already in the car. So
you should be used to it by now.
I was like, I can't grab a sweater. That doesn't help me now. So I know we don't have much time here, but I wanted to bring you on to talk about last night in San Francisco. Voters overwhelmingly voted in support of several ballot measures aimed to quell the spike in crime and drugs. Who could have guessed that would have happened? So now they voted for Measure E to expand police powers by making it easier for officers to pursue suspects and provide the police force with new cameras and drones, and Measure F, which will require drug screenings for adults receiving welfare, both passed with 60% or above in favor. And wow.
What a crazy shift. It was just a couple of years ago where they were ushering in Chesa Boudin as the radical DA. Yep. And if you don't know who he is, he's basically like a Marxist with, I think it was his parents were in Weather Underground.
Yes.
They went from that to getting rid of him mid-tenure and now radically reversing everything. But look at the trend. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, wasn't he the first like Soros-backed DA that we saw?
So
was he the first one?
Well, I looked into his connections to Soros were a lot more hard to find out. There was like groups that support groups that eventually go back. But I mean but the traces were there, and all those other DAs and attorney generals that were getting thrown in by Soros, they were either on their way out or they're now in those areas. What's happening now in San Francisco is the same. But I mean, this is a crazy trend. Just what was it this week? Also, Oregon.
Right.
They're recriminalizing drugs because they found out that, when you just let people run wild with drugs.
Turns out that's not a good policy.
Not very good.
Who knew?
Some people might overdose, and so they're reversing. New York governor now putting National Guard in the subways. Is this, go to places like Mexico where you're like, oh my gosh, that guy's standing there with an Uzi and he's got a uniform on. Like, what is happening? Am I safe? That is now New York City.
I know.
Gosh.
It turns out, Jason, that not like having law and order in your cities is not a good policy, it turns out. I don't know who could have possibly predicted that just letting people run wild and decriminalizing things like, petty theft and all of these things that we all agreed were bad things and shouldn't happen. It turns out that that's not such a good idea.
Where do they get this research? I mean, where do you find research material on that? If you just let people like break the law, where does it say they're going to break the law then? And do violent things? Where do they get this?
I just
give them the benefit of the doubt, sir.
No, I won't. I won't. And you're seeing these leftist, I was going to say utopia for them, but clearly I mean dystopia, all of these cities and how far they've fallen. And part of me is like, I don't even know if you put the genie back in the bottle at this point. Like when you're talking about New York with Kathy Hochul saying that they're going to put these, more National Guard in the subways and all. And now all of a sudden you guys are going to get tough on this, but like, is it too late?
Yeah. I don't think so. I think there will be a radical shift back to normalcy. I hope so. Like they railed for the longest time against stop and frisk. This is essentially stop and frisk. Did you read like the details? So if they're going to go through and if people have handbags, they're going to go and look through their handbags.
What?
Yes, in New York City. So imagine you just go in with your purse and like there's a uniformed guy, a military guy. It's like, I'm sorry, sir, I'm going to have to look into your purse. Screw you. Like in New York?
Wow.
That's how bad it has gotten there.
Yeah.
I saw this insane rant by Jon Stewart. Have you seen any of his stuff as he's come back?
Try not to.
He's actually kind of a little bit more balanced, so he'll actually hit Biden like SNL like rarely ever does, if any at all. But he was talking about, the just incredible, like there is not a rise in immigrant crime. Well, ask the family of Laken Riley if there's a rise but they point to these allegorical searches. I don't care about your allegorical comparisons on numbers. Right. I don't care if there's more domestic crime than there is illegal immigrant crime. That's illegal immigrant crime is crime that should never have happened.
Right.
They don't belong here. She should be alive right now if you would enforce the law.
Right.
It's a cascading effect. You're not enforcing the law on the border. You're going to have illegal immigrant crime. You're not enforcing the law in these cities, which I think he even mentioned in his monologue. He's like, I think, we've got domestic crime. It's not just yeah, we do, because your people are not enforcing the law. Right. Have you seen the study? It just blows my mind. I'll see all of these. There was an NBC report, a few other reports that I was looking at that was saying, if you look at it, crime is actually on the decline. And they'll look at violent crime and they'll see like homicides and things like that that have declined since the pandemic. Well, clearly there's a rise in just, robberies, burglaries, larceny, because otherwise we wouldn't have effing National Guard in the subways.
Right. Don't worry, everything's fine. We're just militarizing
Look
everything.
Look at the studies. Not just troops.
Right. Okay, all right, Jason, hang with me. Okay.
I'm hanging.
Hang with me. We got to take a break, but we want to thank our sponsor really quick, Relief Factor. So for those of you who are living in constant pain, it doesn't have to be that way, all right? What you don't realize is that these aches, these pains, the arthritis, whatever the case may be, it's most likely due to the inflammation in your body. And so you got to target the inflammation to actually get rid of the pain for good. You can do that with Relief Factor. It's an all-natural anti-inflammatory, and it can get rid of your pain. It can be life-changing. So here's what I'm telling you to do. Go to relieffactor.com, get their 3-week quick start. 70% of the people who try that keep ordering more. It's working for that many people. The odds are in your favor. It can work for you. And when it does, it can be life-changing. It's $19.95, and it comes with a feel better or get your money back guarantee. So you've got nothing to lose except your pain over at relieffactor.com. That is relieffactor.com. Jason, I give you our Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. Watch.
Because when we think about the strength of our democracy, I think that there's a duality to the nature of democracy.
Is there?
When it's intact, it's so strong in terms of what it does to uphold and protect individual rights and freedoms. So strong in its nature. And very fragile. It will only be as strong as our willingness to fight for it.
She is so high on something.
And now deep thoughts.
It's so strong. Imagine this, Jason. This woman went to law school, passed her bar, had like a very high prestigious career in California, and she can't even speak.
Well, we know how she rose the ranks.
Well,
come on. I think that's
what she said to Willie Brown.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so strong.